Well, Curtis, thank you so much for spending the time to talk with us. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
So we have a few questions for you. The first one I want to know is, of course, you host King of the Nerds,
Right.
and of course, famously, you're part of the Revenge of the Nerds cast.
Yes.
In your opinion, how have nerds changed between the '80s and today?
Oh my God, it's a huge change. And I'm not. I think if we attribute it to anything, it's got to be the internet and the rise of Comic-Con, because what those things did for us, is people like us, is that it allowed them to sort of get out of the church basement where the comic book sales used to be, or somebody's garage. It allowed people who were really sort of ostracized and had no contact, outside of maybe one or two people in school, somebody that you knew. You had no contact with people who had the same passions for things that you did. I mean, if you were strictly a science nerd, you had your science class. But aside from that, all the other stuff, you had to rely on, small groups gathering, and you couldn't get that exposure that we have now. What that exposure did in the first place was it made us feel better, because it made us realize that there were more people out there like us. And so we were able to really enjoy that and have more contact with the outside world. But it also gave the outside world a look into what they had been missing all that time.
Right.
That we had been sitting up in our room, and wherever it was where we were gathering in these sad little groups of nerds. Suddenly, this had become a much bigger thing, and then an enormous thing. And when that happened, then people started to go, oh, it's the old, I'm not a nerd, but before it became acceptable, it's the sort of, I'm not a feminist, but people want to make sure that they are everybody's clear on the fact that they're not weird about it or anything. They feel like, So I think what people did then, and it actually happened with feminism as well, that one of the things that happened was, when you got more exposure to it, it became less weird and less scary and less different. And even though you might not still consider yourself a nerd, you would be still saying, I forgot about how fun comic books are.
Right.
Or, gee, I haven't seen Star Wars since it opened. Maybe I should, rent it, or whatever. So suddenly there are elements of it which become exciting to people. They may not have thought about it before, but now they're part of it. And that makes the nerds a little less, strange and dismissive.
Yeah.
Dismissible is, once people on the outside see it, then that's exciting for them. And then it becomes part of movies, it becomes part of television, so that you have a movie like American Beauty, for example, which was sort of I think of American Beauty, not just because they referenced Revenge of the Nerds, which was cool, but I thought that movie was sort of an indication, even though it was an independent movie, it wasn't a big studio movie, it was an indication that things were switching. And then they start doing movies about Bill Gates and blah, 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 and, so on. But that was the movie where I thought being a nerd became acceptable to mainstream, outside of the stuff that we were doing back in the days.
So how do you think Booger would fare on King of the Nerds?
Oh, Booger would be useless on King of the Nerds. He was, the thing about Booger was, he wasn't a nerd at all. He had, when you think about that movie, he had no nerd qualities at all. As we think about nerd values, they didn't exist. We don't know whether he was I mean, we get a sense that he might have been smart, but he certainly didn't show it.
Right.
He was a sociopath. I mean, he wants to blow up people. He wants to give drugs to children. He's groping women whenever he gets. I mean, he's a horrible person. There's very little about Booger that's of any value, except when the chips are down and the nerds are being attacked, he's there for them.
Right.
And he will fight to the death to protect the nerds. So there's the loyalty. But aside from that, there's nothing really very nice about Booger. And, we can't smell him, but we can assume that he probably doesn't really look after himself. So as a nerd, he's not a nerd, therefore he would have been useless as a contestant on King of the Nerds because, we don't have any challenges about, nose picking or belching contests. We don't do that sort of thing on King of the Nerds.
Not yet.
Not yet. We'll see what happens. If we get a pickup for season 3, I'm thinking belching contest.
Nice. Well, that actually goes along to one of the questions I want to ask. Do you ever have fans who walk up to you, knowing you from as that character, and expecting you to belch on command?
Oh, sure, yeah, all the time. Especially then. Less so now, I think, because people who recognize me now might know me. They might know me best for Booger, but they know that I do other things, and it's it becomes less of a thing. But at the time, it was horrible because you would get all these people, and they were, the funny thing about the character of Booger was he seemed to draw people that were like him. So while the other nerds, Bobby and, Tony and all those people, they might have people come up to them who were nerds. I'd come up with Booger types. That's what I would draw. And the other weird thing about it is, and this always amazed me, I would always get Jocks. And I never understood it. And finally it began to sink in because I'd have these guys come up to me, and they would be, the chest, the wall-to-wall muscles, and the, no neck, and, and obviously, the football player maybe, gone a little to seed since he left high school or college. And these guys would come up to me on the street and say, "Hey, man, I got to tell you, Booger, right? I got to tell you, that movie meant everything to me because that was my story. That was me when I was in college." And I'm looking at the earnestness that this guy's talking with, and I'm thinking, you fucking liar. You used to beat up people like me, and I know it. But that would be my initial response. But then I would think, they had a pecking order. Oops. Or two who I'm looking at I think this guy was the worst kind of jock. This was ogre. But as far as he was concerned, there were guys above him who used to pick on him, who used to bully him, and then he'd take it out on the nerds, right?
Right.
So I think it has that effect on people, and they do. I get it all the time from people saying that was, I got shoved into closets. Into lockers. I got beat up in the showers by the jocks. Those kinds of things. All the time, still do. I'm on a second generation of people coming up and telling me their life story.
So I know that when we first heard about King of the Nerds, we were kind of worried of how it would portray nerds. But
I know.
We watched the first season and just fell in love with the show. What do you hope that people get out of the show?
What I have said repeatedly to our production associates. Is if you are ever at a loss, just go back to the last scene of Revenge of the Nerds, the scene at the pep rally. I said because Revenge of the Nerds was intended to be a metaphor. I mean, obviously there's lots of panty raids and all that stuff. The broad comedy stuff is all there, and it's supposed to be there, and it's meant to be a funny movie. But it's also a metaphor for prejudice. It's a metaphor for intolerance, and to encourage people to accept people for who they are. And that's the thing when they stand up there and they say, "I'm a nerd and I'm proud," and they say, whoever you are, whatever they called you when you were the alumni, when you were going here, they called you a spaz or a geek or a dork, whatever it was. Come down and join us, and so. I mean, this fucking thing gets me every time. And that's what I always tell them. I said, what I want from this is the idea. I mean, it's a competition reality show, and you have all of that stuff, all of those elements. But I want people to look at those nerds and say, either that was me, or that was my kid, or that was somebody I knew, my brother, or my sister, or even those are the people I used to beat up. And now I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, I probably shouldn't have beaten up those people. So it's actually one of the things that I really love about it. It's a different kind of element than you get on something like Survivor, where it's also a competition reality show, and people, in the first place, we don't want the idea of people voting people out. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that we don't want. That's why when people go, they go because we go to the nerd off and they lose the nerd off. That's how you get rid of people. Mm-hmm. But we don't do it because they're not popular and we want to get rid of them. So we try to do as many things to make people remember what it's like to be an outsider and to be an outcast, and all of these people wind up in the house together, and hopefully it'll trigger something in people.
So I want to switch gears. You've had a really good year. Along with King of the Nerds, we love Supernatural.
Oh, yeah.
We were delighted that you're Metatron.
Me too.
What is it like going into a show and being like the main villain of a season of a show that is like a supernatural type show?
Well, I'm not the main villain. I mean, we still have Mark Shepard, who really is the main victim, main villain. But they have given me great stuff to do. And I remember when I first saw the script, and I just thought, and at that point, all I saw was one script. And I just thought, this is going to be so fun. And, the only danger was, the part was just so great and so well written and so funny. He's so evil and so horrible, and he does such terrible things and is always funny. And I love that. And, it's a literate character, really. And they do that well on that show in general. And I thought, oh, God, I hope they're not assholes. Because everything else is perfect. And I get up there, and lo and behold, it's this fabulous environment. Everybody is great. They're supportive and welcoming and nice. And, these guys have been doing this for 9 years. And when you go on a show and you're not a regular, you go on a show and they've been on it for 9 years, you're running a real good chance that everyone is going to hate everyone else, and they're going to hate you, and they're going to hate coming to work every day. And I've been through that. And this is not that. Yeah. These people are a delight. And so the directors are great. The writers are wonderful. So I've been having the time of my life. And I actually just got back a week or so ago from doing one. And in a few weeks, I'll be going back to do the last two of the season.
Very cool.
No idea what they're going to be doing, but I will be there.
Awesome.
Have you encountered any Supernatural fans that have yelled at you for tricking Castiel?
Yes. I love that. I mean, I have not yet met supernatural fans like on the street
Right.
who yell at me. They go after me on the internet. They do that, but they do it with great affection. I mean, they hate me, but they always want me to know, like on Twitter and so on. They'll say, you need to have your guts removed. We hate you and all that. But they also, also try to make it understood that they don't really feel that way. It's just, love the actor, hate the part.
Right.
And so it's really fun dealing with them. And, people from South America and Russia and everywhere. I mean, it's the fan base, excuse me, the fan base on that show is extraordinary. I mean, I've never seen anything like it.
It's crazy. Has anyone ever shown you their tattoos? Because they get tattoos of the show. It's wild.
I know they do. No one has. Although, strangely enough, I was at a convention, not one of their conventions, but another one. And this guy came up to me and showed me he had a tattoo on his leg of me as Booger.
Oh my God.
From the first show.
Well,
and I was speechless. I mean, the idea that somebody would want to live his life with my face on his leg, incomprehensible, but more power,
It's a whole kind of other immortality. Well, let's go back to King of the Nerds. One of the things I love about the show is they always put you in like really crazy costumes. What has been your favorite so far to wear?
Boy, that's really hard. Let's see. I've had a couple that honest to God, I really like drag. I always have. I've been cast in a number of roles that have required drag over the years. And I don't know. It's not something that I do as a rule, like when I'm home. But boy, it's fun to do it on camera. And so I would say maybe my favorite costume and makeup would be the geisha in season 1. Yeah. It's kind of hard to top the geisha. Although I really liked the busty wench, the sort of Renaissance fair wench from this year. That was pretty cool too. I just love it. I love the idea. We'll be sitting around in the production office before we start because Robin Gurney is our costume designer, and Bronwyn, who's our makeup person. They're the ones who have to make all of this stuff happen, right. And so there will be these discussions about, well, what do you think about dressing you up as a geisha? And I say, fine. I don't care what they dress me up as long as they dress me up. And it's fun to do. So I love it. It makes the nerds happy. Yeah. Because they come out of Nerdvana. They have no idea what we're going to look like on any given day. And it always makes me happy to see them start howling with laughter and pointing.
Would you ever cosplay at a convention?
I don't think so. I didn't know when we started the show. I didn't know what cosplay really was. I didn't know what LARPing. I'd never heard of LARPing. Mm-hmm. I did know because I go to the Scottish festival here at the Queen Mary. I used to go every year, and I started seeing the Society for Creative. What is it? The Society for Creative. Why am I blanking on the name? It's the group of people that live on the weekends like people from the Middle Ages. It's the Society for Creative. Somebody is going to scream when they see I can't remember this name. Anyway, they were the people who I remember. You would go see them at the festivals, and they would be making their own. They would be making their own cloth, and they, the men are all these big guys with swords and stuff, and I always knew them, but that's not LARPing. It's not it's not really cosplay. I think they'd be insulted if you said it was cosplay. This is life.
Yeah.
So that's all I knew. I don't know that I would be that good at cosplay, actually. Maybe I would. I mean, no one's ever asked. That's actually not a question I have ever been asked.
Well, there we go. Hey, Comic-Con is around the corner. You never know.
You can always cosplay as Booger.
Oh, there we go.
Boy, that I don't need to do. If I was going to cosplay as anybody, it would be some, insane, guy from the ancient, distant past. It wouldn't be. There's something a little pathetic, I think, about me dressing up as one of my own characters. I don't see that happening.
So let me ask, one of the cool things about King of Nerds is the fact that everyone comes in and they have their speciality, like this is what
Right.
they're an expert on. If you, Curtis, were a member, what would your speciality be?
Well, my speciality, doesn't really... I'm a book nerd. That would be, so in a funny way, in the first season, there was no nerd there that I really had anything in common with, because they had so many interests, and their specialities were ones that I wouldn't have been able to compete with. This year we have Brian, and Brian's a historian and librarian, and I found out that he is one of his favorite writers is James Boswell, who was the great biographer of Dr. Samuel Johnson. And I love Johnson and Boswell. I've never met anybody who loves Johnson and Boswell, ever. So that was kind of exciting for me. Now, mind you, it's lucky that he doesn't just have that specialty, because it would probably never come up as an issue in a challenge. And he's got all the other stuff going for him, so he's fine, But really, knowledge of, old movies, any kind of book thing from the last 300 years, and I guess Beatles knowledge. I mean, this is what's so sad about me is I was a movie nerd and a book nerd and a music nerd with a strong passion for the Beatles. So that's really it.
Well,
I mean, how are those going to come into? They're not going to be very handy in a challenge, I don't think.
You'd have a better fighting chance than Booger, though. So you got that going for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I figure that we'll just, we'll keep doing it. If we come back, we'll keep doing the kinds of things that we're doing, and keep getting well-rounded people. Mm-hmm. That's my problem. Is I'm not well-rounded.
So you and Bobby host together, and you had the kind of Revenge of the Nerds reunion on the show this season.
Right.
Have you guys all stayed friends all these years?
Yeah, we have. I mean, Robert and I would get together every few years, and just for lunch or something. And it was at one of those that we came up with the nerd reality show idea, and then we'll see. We worked with each other in different pairs. Like I did a movie, this little independent, a short film, this past year with Julie Montgomery, and the person who cast us in the movie didn't know or didn't remember that we had been in Revenge of the Nerds together. So I worked with Julie, I've worked with Brian, I've worked with Tony, and Tony's worked with Robert, and Robert's worked with Larry, and so we've all had, and Bobby and Tony, of course. Bobby was on ER, so we've worked with each other in different groups, but we've never had a chance to do anything as a group together, except a couple of conventions.
So I love this season. I think a little more of King of the Nerds than last season.
Why?
And the big part is because you guys finally have a real villain. Because you have Zach.
Yes, you do.
He is amazing. Some of the things that he says, I mean, you couldn't script that stuff.
No, you couldn't. And believe me, it was, I would love to be able to say that, we are geniuses and, we picked Zach because we knew that there was going to be this huge conflict in the house. The truth of the matter is we didn't know that at all. And we were as surprised as anyone. And we, it caused some real problems, some real difficulties with us because, when you see it, it's been very carefully edited because if it hadn't been, it would have been a pretty dark couple of episodes because it caused a lot of conflict in the house. And there was conflict last year, but it was a little more spread out, I mean, there was Danielle and her problem with Genevieve, and then there was Danielle and her problem with Joshua, and then it was mainly Danielle had problems with one person or another, and then it would go away or it would switch to something else, and then all these kinds of things. This year it's so weird because what winds up happening is the first half of the series becomes about Zach and everyone else, which is, there are little conflicts occasionally within the other groups, but basically they blow over pretty quickly. This larger question of what happened with Zach and especially with Mary Kate and Nicole and Katie was really hard, and we really had to, seriously look at how we were going to deal with it because, on the one hand, it's a reality show, but on the other hand, we know that doesn't really mean anything. We have to be able to present the story in a way that's understandable and hopefully enjoyable, and we can't be having this, all this bad blood constantly. So it required a lot of soul searching on our parts.
Yeah, I felt like the first season you guys really established yourself and made very very much made a show that was pro nerd. In this season, it definitely feel like it is a reality show for which it's like you're starting to get those members that you see, and Zach really he's actually one of my favorite now reality show villains of all time. I always expect there's somebody with a straitjacket just off camera ready to jump on him at any minute.
No. It was not that bad at all. And I'm not taking away from it. It was a problem. It was a problem in how he presented himself, and the fact that it was a problem. Right. So I'm not taking anything away from it. But I don't want. One thing that I want to avoid is the idea that people are watching King of the Nerds and having it be like everything else, where they go, all right, well, I want to figure out how Celeste won in that first season, and so they go back and they study, and they see what Celeste did, and then they think maybe they can do that. Strangely enough, I don't think anybody this season was that kind of person where they just thought, well, I'm going to play Celeste's game. Mm. I don't think anybody did. But we are a reality show, but we have to try to make it entertaining at the same time. And we needed to, obviously this was all a long time ago for us. We finished shooting in August of last year. So in the interim, we're at my house right now. We had a party here that had to be seen to be believed. And we had all of the nerds here from the second season except Josh and Katie, and they couldn't make it. But all of the rest of them were here, along with 5 of the nerds from season 1. And it was so much fun. And Zach was here, and he was great. And I think a lot of that has been has been resolved since. But it was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough.
So how do you cast for the show? Do people like send in videos or?
Yeah. Yeah, well, the first time, now everybody knows about it.
Right.
So they're already, we haven't even been picked up, and they're making movies already, I'm sure. But the first time, when we did it the first season, no one knew anything about the series, and no one knew that Bobby and I were involved. They made a point of what they would do is they went to Comic-Con and one or two other places and just handed out these pieces of paper, and they said like leaflets, and it said something like, "Are you a nerd? Would you be interested in being involved in a television show about nerds? If so, make a short film describing yourself as to why you're a nerd, or how you're a nerd, what your loves are, and why you should be on the show, and then send it to this address." And we got an because it started spreading very quickly. People were saying, "I'm, auditioning for this show," and we got hundreds of these films. So we have a casting agent who, as these things start flooding in, she goes through a lot of them, and then she'll come to us with maybe 30, and we'll all meet in a room and we'll watch these things, and we'll talk about who these people are, what their background is, and so on and so forth, and then it becomes a matter of whittling it down, and then sometimes bringing more in. So even though we may say, well, this is our 30, then there are people, for whatever reason, don't stay. Right. So then we bring in more people, and and it goes on like that, and then finally we get down to 20, maybe, and we eventually bring, I think it's 15, to California to do the show, and the night before the show, 3 are excluded.
Interesting.
So that you wind up with the 11. Now, in the meantime, they also have to go through the doctors, the physicals, and the all of those kinds of things too. Because, we had a great guy the first year, but he had some kind of a heart problem, and he was top of everybody's list. But you can't take chances with people's health. So, there are things they have to go through, and lots of interviews and so on. And then we pick our 11 and we're off.
So you guys have some great people that come in and, like guest stars, like you had George Takei this season.
Yeah.
Do you have, is there a certain wish list of people that you want to have come in that capacity?
You know what really I find really frustrating about this is, really until about 3 years ago, I had seen Big Bang Theory, but I wasn't a regular watcher of Big Bang Theory. I liked it. I thought it was funny, but I didn't watch it regularly. Right. And then when we started working at TBS, I started watching everything on TBS, and I started watching Big Bang Theory. And what I've noticed since is everybody we wanted has already been on the Big Bang Theory. And if you don't watch King of the Nerds, a lot of people just assume, oh, it's another nerd show. Or, even worse, it's a show that's ripping off the Big Bang Theory.
Huh.
Of course it's not. But, George was at the top of everybody's list. But a lot of other people who were on our list, I think we haven't approached them maybe necessarily, but I know that a lot of them are going to have issues with the fact that this is another nerd show, and they're probably not going to be that interested in it because they've already done it. you know. But the great scientists, I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and now I mean, this year we had Bill Nye, which was exciting, and he was always at the top of our list. Also, we were just sometimes we have to wait for the appropriate challenge, you know, so that Yaya Han. We decided when we were going to do a cosplay challenge, there was absolutely no question. Yaya Han had to be there, and we love her so much. We asked her to be back this year as well. But everybody has turned out great. Everyone who has been on the show has worked out really well, and they seem to enjoy it. So, you know, it's been fun.
Are you going to be at any conventions this year? I'm assuming you'll be at Comic-Con, but will you be doing any other conventions?
I don't know. I think, I mean, if we get picked up, I'm sure we will be at Comic-Con. If we don't get picked up, probably not. But yeah, I am going to Kentucky to the Lexington convention, which is just in about 2 weeks, I think. It's like the 14th of March. It's even less than 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to be going to that. I'm also going to the Philadelphia Comic-Con. Those are at the moment the only two I have scheduled. So we'll be doing that. But I don't know, you know, the big Comic-Cons I wouldn't go to unless asked.
Right.
And you know, if the show doesn't come back, then they probably won't ask.
So are you a comic book fan at all?
Not really. It's not one of the areas that ever. When I was a kid, there was a period of time where I used to buy some comics, but I'm really not knowledgeable in them at all. When I was a kid, what I used to do was I would buy Famous Monsters of Filmland because I was a horror film geek and a science fiction geek. So that, and we're talking now about like 1960, you know, that when I started buying them at the local candy store near my grandparents' house. And that was my big passion. It wasn't comic books.
What was your favorite monster growing up?
The classic Universal monsters, going from the silent days through the 40s. Those are my favorite movies of all time. I love those, and I could, in fact, while I was up in Vancouver doing Supernatural a couple weeks ago, took the mummies with me. Nice. I was watching them in my room.
That's awesome.
So I know at least I have one more question. This is in tribute to this season of King of the Nerds, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. But Curtis, Star Wars or Star Trek? Which one's better?
Star Trek, no question.
Nice.
I mean, that was my. I was telling somebody the other day about this. Is that I had when I was in college, when I was at the Academy of Dramatic Arts, I was in Detroit, and this is 1973. There was a Star Trek convention. It was the first one in Detroit, the first Star Trek convention, and I went. That's for me. So I went down there, and because I loved the show. I still love the show. The later ones, I can't tell you, but the original series, that's mine. And I went down there. It was so small that it was held in 3 rooms at a hotel. And there was a hawker's room, but they had basically nothing, you know. Used paperbacks of, you know, the James Blish books and that kind of stuff, some pictures and posters and that kind of stuff. Then there was a room where they were showing the episodes on a projector, 16 millimeter, right? So it's rattling away as you're sitting in a room with, you know, these people watching the old episodes, and then a room where you could meet the cast, and they brought in George and Walter and James Doohan, and they were there, and there was no one there. I mean, it was such lousy turnout for this thing that you could go in and get their autograph, and then you just sat around and talked to them about anything you wanted to. You're going, Return to Forever. What was, and so they have, they have all these, in trouble with tribbles. There's something wrong that, and they're being very generous and very nice and letting us all go, I found a mistake in action. And so it was really cool.
Wow.
So that was my beginning. Star Wars came along. I loved it. I thought it was a lot of fun. But my heart will always belong to the USS Enterprise.
Nice.
We're right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
We're right there. It's amazing how times have changed. That you would not have that experience today.
Yeah, seriously. So you also voice Snot on American Dad.
Yes.
Was that intended? Do you know if that was actually based off of Booger or based off of you? And
yeah,
so the role was always intended for you?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, because I never read for it. Mm-hmm. So, this was really early. I mean, it was in the first season. I don't remember the first episode that Snot appears, but Seth MacFarlane was a fan. It would be funny to have a friend named Snot and then have me play him. So, yeah, I've been doing it ever since.
That's awesome.
It's really, really wonderful. And we did one just recently, which was a big Snot episode. Sounds true. It was a big Snot episode, which Zoe Deschanel was in, where it was done like an indie movie, and it was really funny.
Curtis, was there anything that you wanted to tease for the rest of the season of King of the Nerds?
When does this air?
This will air this week. Tomorrow.
This airs tomorrow.
Thursday.
Or Thursday, rather. Thursday, sorry.
Oh, the Thursday. Okay. Well, we're getting down to it. We have 2 more to go. This coming one is kind of awesome because we decided we were going to, for our, we had a live gaming one last year where they were having to, maneuver all of these things around this thing through traps and so on. It was really fun. So for our live gaming this year, we decided to put them all in Tron, in the game, Tron.
Wow.
And that is one of the things that happens in this episode. Obviously, I can't go into a great deal of detail, but if you watched last week, you know that we have reached that point where the 2 teams no longer exist. So it's a one-person game now. And what we did was we put them in this huge go-kart building, but we blacked everything. So it's pitch black. And the only light you have is the LED lights on their costumes and on the cars
so cool.
as they go. It's awesome. And very cool.
Do you and Robert get to try out any of those things before the cast do?
Nah, you kidding? No. I mean, I spent most of my time getting into the damn outfit. And then once I was in it, I thought, no, let the kids have fun. I'm just going to sit here and talk to Mindy. Because that's another thing to think about. We've got Pom Pom Kitty back.
Nice.
Mindy Robinson, who we love. And so she's going to be joining us.
Well, we certainly hope that King of the Nerds gets picked up for another season. We love the show. We think you guys did a great job of making nerds and geeks, just awesome and let their true colors fly in the best way possible.
Well, just for the record, we don't make anybody look like nerds or geeks. We release them into their natural habitat, and the rest of us can, watch it. I mean, it's not obviously because of the circumstance. It's not something which you can. It's obviously not really their natural habitat. Nobody lives in a cool house like that. And they're strangers and they're cut off from the world and all that. But it does give people a chance to see what nerds are really made of. And it's one of the things, this has been the greatest, even if we don't come back. This, for me, has been one of the great experiences of my life. And the reason it's been great is because of the nerds. I love them. And if any of you are, any of the nerds are watching this now, mwah.
Yeah, I mean, we completely appreciate that you've been part of something that has taught everyone that it's okay to let your geek flag fly. So,
Hear, hear.
Also?
Yeah.
Great. Well, Curtis, thank you so much for spending this time and talking with us. We had a great time, and you're an
My
icon,
pleasure.
and it's just been great.
Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to it. We'll have to talk again sometime.
Absolutely.
Definitely.